The wind in Montana Territory, 1877, carried more than just dust and the smell of pine. It often carried laughter, sharp and unkind, aimed at Samuel. He was a good cook, the best on the Bar M Ranch, known for his hearty stews and biscuits that melted in your mouth. But Samuel had a secret, one that everyone knew. He couldn't read a single word nor write one. Each morning, as the sun peeked over the mountains, Samuel would be stirring a pot, his brow furrowed not just from the heat of the fire. He heard the ranch hands joking as they headed out. "Samuel, you reckon that sign says, 'Beware of bear' or 'biscuits for sale'?" They'd snicker, and he'd pretend not to hear, his cheeks burning. In town, it was no different. When the general store owner pointed to a new shipment list, Samuel would just grunt, feigning disinterest, and ask for things by pointing. He felt the pitying glances, the whispers. They stung worse than any winter frost. His hands, strong from years of kneading dough and chopping wood, felt clumsy when faced with a printed page. He longed to understand the words, to know what the newspapers said, to read the labels on the spice jars. But the chance had never come, and now, at his age, he figured it never would. He just bowed his head a little lower, stirring his pots, and tried to make his food so good that it would somehow make up for his secret shame. The kitchen was his kingdom, a place where words didn't matter, only the warmth of the fire and the taste of his cooking. Outside those walls, however, the world was a tangle of letters he couldn't untangle, a constant reminder of what he lacked. He was a good man with a kind heart, but the world seemed to only see what he couldn't do. While Samuel toiled in his kitchen, a quiet presence in town often saw more than others. Widow Clara Jennings lived in a small, tidy house, its windows always sparkling. Her days were filled with the rhythmic scrub of laundry and the soft murmur of children's voices. Clara was known for her nimble fingers, both with a washboard and with chalk. Many of the town's youngsters, their faces scrubbed clean, would gather at her table, learning their ABCs and how to spell their names. She had a gentle way about her, a calm smile that put even the shyest child at ease. Clara noticed things. She saw the way Samuel's shoulders would slump when the ranch hands made their jests. She saw the quick flush that rose in his cheeks when he had to point at items in the store instead of reading a list. She even noticed how he would sometimes pick up a discarded newspaper, turning it over in his hands as if hoping the words might magically reveal their meaning to him. Most people just laughed or looked away, but Clara felt a pang of understanding. She knew what it felt like to be alone, to carry a burden that others didn't fully grasp. Her own life had been hard since her husband passed, but she found purpose in her work and in teaching. She saw the longing in Samuel's eyes, a hunger for knowledge that went deeper than just wanting to avoid ridicule. It was a silent plea, a yearning to be part of a world that seemed closed off to him. Clara often walked past the ranch cookhouse on her way to deliver clean shirts, and sometimes she'd catch Samuel's eye. He'd offer a quick, shy nod, and she'd return it with a small, kind smile. She didn't mock him, she simply saw him. And in seeing him, she saw his hidden shame, a heavy cloak he wore daily. A thought began to form in her mind, a quiet idea blooming like a wildflower in the Montana spring. One chilly evening, as dusk painted the sky in shades of purple and orange, Samuel was cleaning his pots. The ranch hands had eaten and gone, leaving the cookhouse quiet. He was lost in thought, the familiar ache of his secret shame a dull throb. Suddenly, a soft knock came at the door. Samuel wiped his hands on his apron and pulled open the door. It was Clara, her bonnet tied neatly under her chin, a small book tucked under her arm. "Good evening, Samuel," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I had a thought I wished to share." Samuel, surprised, stepped aside, gesturing her in. He offered her a seat by the warm stove, a steaming mug of coffee in her hand. Clara explained her offer, her eyes kind and steady. "I see your struggles, Samuel, and I believe you have a keen mind. I'd be happy to teach you if you'd be willing to learn. In exchange, perhaps a warm meal each evening." A tremor went through Samuel. The hope he'd buried so deep so long ago suddenly stirred. He cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he began, his voice rough with emotion, I don't know what to say, it's been so long, I'm not sure I could learn. Nonsense, Clara said, a gentle smile gracing her lips. Learning has no age limit, we'll start slow, what do you say? And so their lessons began. Each evening after the ranch hands had eaten and gone to their bunks, Clara would arrive, sometimes with a small slate, sometimes with a worn primer. Samuel would have a hot meal waiting for her, a stew, fresh bread, or roasted meat. At first it was incredibly hard. His big, strong hands, so good with a knife and a skillet, felt clumsy holding a piece of chalk. The letters danced on the slate, a jumble of lines and curves that made no sense. He'd frown, his brow furrowed in concentration, often sighing in frustration. "It's no use, Clara," he'd grumble, rubbing his temples. "My head's too thick." But Clara never lost her patience. "Just one more time, Samuel," she'd say, her voice calm and steady. She'd guide his hand, tracing the shapes of the letters in the air, then on the slate. "See, the A is like a little mountain with a bar across. The B has two round bellies." She'd point to objects in the kitchen, helping him sound out pot and cup and fire. Sometimes an hour would pass, and he'd barely learned a single new letter. Yet Clara's encouragement was a steady flame, warming his doubt. She'd praise his smallest successes, making him feel that each wobbly line was a great victory. Slowly, painstakingly, Samuel started to see the shapes, to hear the sounds. He was building something, letter by letter, with Clara's gentle help. Weeks turned into a month, then two. The cookhouse evenings became their own private world, filled with the scratching of chalk, the rustle of pages, and the quiet comfort of shared effort. Samuel still struggled, often biting his lip in concentration, but the frustration was slowly giving way to a new feeling, a tiny spark of understanding. He started to recognize words on the flour sacks, to read the numbers on the almanac hanging by the stove. It was like a fog slowly lifting from his mind. One evening, Clara brought a fresh piece of paper and a sharp pencil. "Today," she announced, her eyes twinkling, "we're going to write something special." Samuel felt a familiar knot of nerves, but also a thrill he hadn't known before. Clara carefully wrote a name, big and clear, at the top of the paper, Clara. "Now you try," she encouraged, handing him the pencil. Samuel stared at the letters, the shapes now familiar yet so daunting to recreate. He took a deep breath, his big hand gripping the pencil as if it were a delicate bird. He started with the C, a shaky curve. Then the L, a tall, straight line. He moved slowly, his tongue poking out the corner of his mouth in deep thought. Each letter was a battle, a small victory won with focus and effort. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he lifted the pencil. On the paper, beneath Clara's perfectly formed name, was his own shaky, imperfect rendition. Clara, it wasn't perfect. The A's were a little lopsided, the R a bit wobbly, but it was there. His own hand had formed those letters. He looked at it, then at Clara, his eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and overwhelming joy. A slow, proud smile spread across his face, a smile she hadn't truly seen before. Clara beamed, her own eyes moist. "You did it, Samuel," she whispered, her voice full of warmth. "You wrote my name." It was a profound moment, a triumph born of hard work and gentle guidance. In that small cookhouse, under the flickering lamplight, Samuel had not only written a name, but he had also etched a new sense of worth into his own heart. The world of words, once so daunting, had finally begun to open up to him, letter by painstaking letter. The next market day dawned bright and bustling, the town square alive with vendors calling out their wares and folks greeting each other. Samuel usually kept to the edges, making his purchases quickly and quietly, eager to escape the stares and whispers. But today was different. He walked with Clara by his side, a feeling of new strength in his chest. They stopped at the general store, where Mr. Henderson, the owner, was tacking up a new list of goods for sale. Ranch hands from the Bar M were there, too, laughing and trading jokes, some of them the very men who had made sport of Samuel's inability to read. As Mr. Henderson finished putting up the list, he turned to Clara. "Good morning, Mrs. Jennings. Just putting up the new ledger for signing. Fresh eggs and butter just came in if you're interested." Clara smiled warmly. Indeed, Mr. Henderson, I'll take 2 dozen eggs and a pound of butter. She reached for the quill pen, ready to sign her name as she always did, but before she could, Samuel gently took the pen from her hand. "Excuse me, Clara," he said, his voice a little shaky but firm. He looked at Mr. Henderson, then at the ledger. "I'll be signing for that." A hush fell over the small crowd. The ranch hands stopped their joking, their eyes widening. Mr. Henderson blinked, surprised, but handed Samuel the pen. Samuel took a deep breath. He held the quill carefully, remembering Clara's patient guidance. He looked at the blank line, then at Clara, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. With slow, deliberate strokes, he began to write. His hand wasn't as practiced as Clara, but each letter was clear, carefully formed. Samuel, he finished, setting the quill down with a soft click and stepped back. There beside Clara's elegant script was his own name, imperfect but undeniably present. A wave of pride, hot and strong, washed over him, chasing away years of shame. The ranch hands stared, their mouths agape, unable to believe what they had just seen. The silence in the general store was thick, broken only by the creak of the floorboards. The ranch hands, who minutes before had been boisterous, now stood frozen, their grins replaced by looks of pure disbelief. Old Man Johnson, known for his loud jokes, rubbed his chin, his eyes wide. Billy, the youngest of the crew, actually dropped his hat. They squinted at the ledger, then back at Samuel, as if trying to reconcile the cook they knew with this new, confident man. Mr. Henderson, recovering his composure, cleared his throat. "Well, Samuel," he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face, "that's a fine signature. Didn't know you had it in you." Samuel didn't gloat, didn't even crack a triumphant smile. He simply nodded, a quiet dignity in his posture. The shame that had burdened him for so long had vanished, replaced by a deep, steady pride that warmed him from the inside out. He felt lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He met the stunned gaze of the ranch hands, not with anger, but with a calm assurance that needed no words. He had faced his biggest fear, and he had won. Clara placed a gentle hand on his arm, her eyes shining with admiration. "That was wonderful, Samuel," she whispered, her pride in him evident. He turned to her, and in that shared glance, a silent conversation passed between them, of hard work, of patience, and of a bond forged in quiet, determined learning. The ranch hands, still somewhat dumbfounded, slowly began to mumble. "Well, I'll be," Old Man Johnson finally managed, shaking his head. "Who'd have thought?" Their mockery was gone, replaced by a grudging respect, perhaps even a touch of awe. Samuel just bought his supplies, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. He no longer felt like a prisoner of the written word. He was its master, and the world suddenly seemed a much wider, more welcoming place. His transformation was not just about signing his name. It was about reclaiming his place in the world, standing tall and unafraid. Still in a daze, but Samuel and Clara walked away from the store, a comfortable quiet settling between them. The market day continued, but for Samuel the real triumph had already occurred. Many more evenings passed in the warm glow of the cookhouse. Samuel's reading grew stronger, and his writing became more steady. He read aloud from Clara's worn storybooks, his rough voice softening with each word he understood. He wrote letters, short at first, then longer, finding joy in stringing words together. Their shared lessons had woven a tapestry of trust and affection between them, a silent understanding that went deeper than words on a page. One evening, Samuel had a special meal ready for Clara. The stew was richer, the bread sweeter, and a small, flickering candle sat on the table. After they ate, Samuel cleared the dishes, his hands trembling slightly. He brought out a fresh piece of paper and his best pencil. Clara watched him, a question in her gentle eyes. Samuel took a deep breath. He held the pencil, not with the struggle of earlier days, but with a new sense of purpose. Slowly, carefully, he began to write, his hand moving with a focus that silenced everything else. He formed the first letter, then the next, and the next. It wasn't perfect, still a little shaky, but it was clear. When he finally lifted the pencil, a single word stood on the page: wife. He looked up at Clara, his heart thumping like a drum. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simple silver ring, polished to a shine. He held it out to her, his eyes full of hope and a love that needed no words to be understood. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening, then filling with tears. She looked from the word on the paper to Samuel's earnest face, then to the ring. A soft, joyful sob escaped her lips. She nodded, a radiant smile blooming on her face, and whispered, "Yes, Samuel, yes." In that small, lamplit kitchen, a new chapter began, written not just in shaky script, but in the enduring language of two hearts finally finding their way home.